Story number 1. Midnight Delivery, The Hungry Shadows. Portland, Oregon. I've always considered myself a rational man. Growing up in the quiet suburbs of Portland, I learned to value practicality over superstition. So when I took up a part-time job as a pizza delivery driver to make ends meet during my final year of college, I never imagined that one late-night delivery would blur the lines between reality and the supernatural. It was a chilly October night, the kind where the fog rolls in thick from the Willamette River, cloaking the streets in an eerie stillness. My shift had ended hours ago, but the promise of a few extra bucks kept me on the road longer than usual. My car, a beat-up Honda Civic, hummed steadily as I navigated the quiet, dimly lit streets of Portland's outskirts. I checked my phone for the next order, the screen illuminating my tired face. A single delivery remained, a large pepperoni pizza to 437 Maple Drive, a location I didn't recognize. A quick search showed it was an abandoned house, rumored to be haunted, but I shrugged it off. Portland's urban legends were plentiful, but as a skeptic, I didn't give them much weight. With a deep breath, I punched in the address and headed towards Maple Drive. The GPS led me through winding roads, flanked by overgrown hedges and dilapidated fences. As I approached the destination, the house came into view, a Victorian-era structure, its paint peeling and windows darkened with grime. The front yard was overgrown, and the silence was almost palpable, broken only by the distant hoot of an owl. Parking a safe distance from the house, I grabbed the pizza from the box and double-checked the order details. One large pepperoni pizza, no special instructions. Odd, but not unusual. I made my way to the front door, the cold night air nipping at my face. The house stood ominously still, the door slightly ajar, creaking gently with the whisper of the wind. "Just leave it here," I muttered to myself, stepping forward. I placed the pizza on the doorstep, the warmth of the box contrasting sharply with the frigid air. My heart raced slightly, not from fear, but from the unease of delivering to such a desolate place. As I turned to leave, a faint sound stopped me in my tracks, a soft, shuffling noise coming from inside the house. My rational mind kicked in, attributing it to the house settling or perhaps an animal scurrying about. I shook off the feeling and started to walk away, but then I heard it again, a whisper, barely audible, yet unmistakably clear. "Don't go." I froze, my breath visible in the cold air. The voice was desperate, tinged with hunger. I glanced back towards the house, my skepticism wavering. "Hello?" I called out, my voice betraying a hint of fear. Silence answered me. I took a step back, my mind racing with possible explanations. Probably just the wind, I rationalized, trying to convince myself. But then, another sound, a soft, dragging noise, like footsteps being pulled across the floor. Panic began to set in. I had to get out of there. I hurried towards my car, the icy ground crunching beneath my boots. As I reached the driver's side, I heard the door behind me slam shut with a force that rattled my bones. My heart pounded in my chest as I turned to face the house, now completely dark except for a faint blue glow emanating from a window on the second floor. "What do you want from me?" I demanded, my voice cracking under the strain of fear. The blue light flickered, and through the window, I saw the silhouette of a woman. She was dressed in a flowing white gown, her hair cascading down her back like a dark waterfall. Her eyes were hollow, voids that seemed to pierce through my very soul. She raised a hand, pointing towards me, her expression one of anguish and desperation. "I'm hungry," she whispered, her voice echoing unnaturally around me. "Don't leave us hungry." Before I could respond, the blue light intensified, casting long, distorted shadows across the house. The air grew colder, the fog thicker, and the night seemed to press in on me from all sides. I stumbled back, desperately trying to open my car door, but it wouldn't budge. My keys rattled in the ignition, but the engine remained silent. The woman's figure began to change, her form becoming more translucent, almost ghostly. The other silhouettes started to appear, figures in white, all pointing towards me, their eyes hollow and empty. "We're still hungry," they chorused, their voices blending into a haunting melody of despair. I felt a surge of adrenaline, my survival instincts kicking in. I forcefully pulled on the door handle, my muscles straining against the stubborn lock. With a final yank, the door gave way, and I bolted into the car, slamming the door shut behind me. I fumbled with the keys, finally starting the engine and speeding away, my heart pounding in my ears. As I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror, expecting to see the apparitions following me. But all I saw was the dark, empty road and the receding blue glow of the haunted house. Breathing heavily, I reached my home, locking the doors behind me. The night's events replayed in my mind, each moment more terrifying than the last. I called the local authorities the next day, reporting the encounter. The dispatcher listened patiently before advising me to stay clear of the house, citing reports of strange occurrences and unexplainable phenomena. Determined to understand what had happened, I delved into the history of 437 Maple Drive. I discovered that in 1955, a young bride named Eleanor had vanished on her wedding night. Her fiancé, Michael, had been searching for her when a sudden blizzard had trapped them both in the house. Michael never found Eleanor, and their disappearance remained a mystery, adding to the house's haunted reputation. I realized that what I had encountered was likely Eleanor and the other spirits of those who had been trapped by the storm, their souls still yearning for release. Their hunger wasn't for food, but for acknowledgement, for someone to remember their tragic fate and help them find peace. Determined to bring closure to their restless spirits, I returned to the house, armed with knowledge and a sense of purpose. I contacted a local paranormal investigator, Rebecca, who specialized in restless spirits and haunted locations. Together, we planned a visit, hoping to communicate with the spirits and help them move on. On a moonless night, Rebecca and I approached the house, the cold wind howling around us. Armed with recording equipment and spiritual artifacts, we entered the house, the door creaking ominously as we pushed it open. The interior was dark and foreboding, the air thick with the weight of untold stories. We set up our equipment in the living room, the same place where I had delivered the pizza. The room was cold, the furniture covered in thick layers of dust and cobwebs. As we began our seance, Rebecca called out to the spirits, her voice calm and steady. "Eleanor, Michael, if you can hear us, please show yourselves. We're here to help." The temperature in the room dropped suddenly, and the air grew heavy with anticipation. The faint blue glow I had seen the night before began to materialize, flickering softly in the corner of the room. Slowly, the apparition of Eleanor appeared, her eyes meeting mine with a mix of sorrow and hope. "Why are you helping us?" I asked gently, my voice barely above a whisper. Rebecca joined in, her voice filled with compassion. "We want to understand your pain and help you find peace. Tell us what you need." Eleanor's form wavered, her ghostly figure becoming more defined. "We are trapped by our past, unable to move on. Our hunger is for remembrance, for our stories to be told and our lives to be acknowledged." I felt a deep sense of empathy, understanding that their spirits were bound by unresolved grief and tragedy. "We will help you. Share your stories with us, and we'll make sure you're remembered." One by one, other spirits began to appear, fellow victims of the storm, their expressions reflecting years of anguish. They shared their tales of love, loss, and the night the storm took everything away. Each story was a thread in the tapestry of their collective memory, binding them to the house and the frozen landscape outside. As the night progressed, Rebecca and I listened intently, documenting each story and ensuring that their memories would not fade into oblivion. The spirits seemed to find solace in being heard, their forms growing more serene with each shared narrative. By dawn, the blue glow had faded, replaced by a sense of calm that filled the house. The spirits stood together, their expressions peaceful, as if a weight had been lifted from their shoulders. "You've given us what we needed," Eleanor said, her voice now filled with gratitude. "Thank you for remembering us." With those words, the spirits began to fade, their forms dissipating into the morning light. The house, once a place of sorrow, now felt lighter, as if the chains of the past had been broken. Rebecca and I left the house, the first rays of sunlight breaking through the clouds and illuminating the snow-covered landscape. As we drove away, I felt a sense of fulfillment, knowing that we had helped bring peace to those who had been forgotten by time. Weeks later, I received a follow-up call from Rebecca. "Tom, I think we did it. The spirits are at peace now. They won't bother you anymore." Relief washed over me. The haunted house was no longer a place of fear but a testament to the power of remembrance and compassion. The mystery of Eleanor and the other spirits had been solved, their stories finally told and their souls freed from their eternal hunger. That night, as I lay in bed, I reflected on the experience. The rational part of me still struggled to reconcile the events, but the emotional truth was undeniable. The act of remembering and honoring the past had made all the difference, bridging the gap between the living and the dead. Portland's quiet suburbs continued to hold their secrets, but I knew that some mysteries were meant to be uncovered, that some spirits sought only recognition and understanding. And as long as there were those willing to listen and remember, the hungry shadows of the past would find their peace, no longer lingering in the darkness of abandoned houses. Story number 2. The Unordered Meal. New York City, New York. I've always prided myself on being organized. Living alone in a small apartment in Manhattan meant that every item had its place, every routine meticulously planned. But that night, my sense of control was shattered in the most unsettling way. It was a chilly November evening, the kind where the city's lights blur into a haze through the damp air. I had just settled into my favorite armchair with a cup of tea, the window open slightly to let in the crisp breeze. The hum of the city was a constant backdrop, a comforting reminder that I wasn't truly alone. My phone buzzed on the coffee table, a notification from a food delivery app. Odd, because I hadn't ordered anything. Curiosity piqued, I unlocked my phone and saw a message from Quick Eats confirming a delivery to my address, 345 West 47th Street, apartment 12B. Confused, I checked my order history. Nothing. I hadn't placed any order that evening. Just as I was about to dismiss it as a glitch, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Quick Eats Delivery. "Hello, is this Amy Thompson?" the voice on the other end asked, sounding polite but slightly strained. "Yes, this is Amy," I replied, my confusion growing. "I don't believe I placed an order." "There seems to be a delivery for you," the delivery person insisted. "The address on the order is correct." I hesitated, uncertainty clouding my judgment. It was late, and the idea of an unsolicited delivery was unsettling. But I decided to take the bag, reasoning that maybe it was a mistake that could be easily rectified. I walked over to the door, the bag in my hands feeling heavier with each step. The hallway was quiet, the only sound being my own footsteps echoing off the concrete walls. My door was usually locked, but tonight it was slightly ajar, swaying gently as if moved by an unseen force. Pushing the door open, I stepped inside, the bag crinkling in my grip. The apartment was as I left it, immaculate, every item in its designated place. I placed the bag on the kitchen counter, the contents illuminated by the soft glow of the overhead light. Inside was an empty lunchbox and a small card. I picked up the card, reading the message scrawled in elegant handwriting, "Thank you for inviting me into your home." A chill ran down my spine. I didn't know who had invited anyone into my home. My apartment was small but secure, with no recent visitors or acquaintances who would know my address. As I stood there, processing the message, I noticed something else. The back door of my apartment was wide open, a stark contrast to how I had always secured it before bed. My heart pounded in my chest as I approached the door, the realization sinking in that someone, or something, had been inside. I turned around to face the kitchen table and gasped. Greasy fingerprints smeared across the surface, smeared in a chaotic pattern that seemed almost deliberate. My mind raced, trying to make sense of the surreal scene. "Who are you?" I whispered, my voice trembling. No answer. Just the oppressive silence of the apartment, broken only by the distant sounds of the city outside. I took a cautious step toward the door, peering out into the hallway. The corridor was empty, the lights off in every other apartment. I had never seen anything like this before. Determined to regain control, I grabbed my phone and dialed the police, my hands shaking as I tried to steady my voice. "Hello, I need to report a possible break-in at my address," I said, my words barely coherent. The dispatcher's voice was calm, but I could sense her concern. "Are you safe, ma'am? Can you see anyone inside?" I shook my head, though she couldn't see me. "Yes, my back door is open, and there are greasy fingerprints on my kitchen table. I don't know who did this. Stay inside and lock all doors and windows. I'm sending an officer to your location immediately. Please stay on the line." I did as instructed, my mind reeling from the unexpected intrusion. Minutes felt like hours as I waited, the apartment seeming to close in around me. Finally, there was a knock at the door, followed by a series of urgent knocks. "Police! Open up," the officer called out. I moved to the window, my heart racing as I saw the uniformed officer approach my door. He knocked again, more forcefully this time. With a deep breath, I unlocked the door and opened it, stepping out into the chilly night. The officer was tall and authoritative, his expression serious. "Good evening, ma'am. I'm Officer Daniels. I received your call. Are you okay?" I nodded, trying to steady my breathing. "Yes, I think so. I don't know what happened." He stepped inside, his eyes scanning the apartment. "Let me take a look." We walked through the living room to the kitchen, where he examined the greasy fingerprints with a flashlight. "These are fresh," he noted. "It looks like someone was here recently." I glanced around, feeling a sense of dread. But I live alone. There's no one else who knows my address. Officer Daniels looked at me with a mixture of sympathy and concern. "Sometimes, intruders can be very careful. Have you noticed anything else unusual tonight?" I thought back to the delivery. I received a delivery I didn't order and the message on the card. It said, "Thank you for inviting me into your home." I have no idea who that could be. He sighed, taking in the information. "We'll need to file a report and maybe look into any potential security camera footage from the area. But right now, I'd suggest staying here until we finish the investigation." As he worked on the paperwork, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every creak of the apartment, every gust of wind outside, seemed amplified in the tense silence. My mind raced with questions. Who had delivered that empty lunchbox? Why was my back door open? What did the message on the card mean? Hours passed, and the investigation continued with no concrete leads. Officer Daniels assured me that we would do everything possible to identify the intruder, but as the night wore on, my anxiety only grew. I decided to take a walk outside to clear my mind, the biting cold cutting through my jacket as I stepped onto the snow-covered streets. The neighborhood was quiet, the streetlights casting long shadows on the pavement. As I walked, I couldn't help but feel like I was being followed, the sensation of eyes on my back unnerving me. I quickened my pace, my footsteps echoing in the empty night. Turning a corner, I almost collided with a figure standing under a street lamp. It was a woman, her hair disheveled and face pale, dressed in a flowing white dress. My heart skipped a beat as I recognized her from the kitchen, the woman from the delivery. "Who are you?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. She looked at me with hollow eyes, her expression sorrowful. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to scare you. Why did you do this?" I asked, fear and confusion lacing my words. "What do you want from me?" She stepped closer, her presence both ethereal and haunting. "I didn't mean any harm. I was hungry. I needed to come inside to find something to eat." My mind raced, trying to reconcile her explanation with the night's terrifying events. But why deliver an empty lunchbox and leave that message? Tears welled up in her eyes. I was invited, but no one came. I waited, and I couldn't leave. Before I could respond, a gust of wind swept through the street, and the woman began to fade, her form becoming translucent. "Please, don't forget me," she whispered before disappearing entirely. I stood there, heart pounding, trying to process what had just happened. The reality of the encounter settled in, leaving me shaken and deeply unsettled. Returning to my apartment, I locked the door behind me, the weight of the night pressing down on me. Officer Daniels arrived to inform me that there had been no other reports of suspicious activity in the area, and no cameras had captured the mysterious delivery or the apparition that had appeared on the street. Days turned into weeks, but the memory of that night lingered. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, the empty lunchbox and the greasy fingerprints serving as constant reminders of the unresolved mystery. Determined to find answers, I delved into the history of my apartment building, uncovering a tragic story that tied everything together. Years ago, in 1955, a young bride named Eleanor Adams had moved into apartment 12B with her new husband, Michael. Their wedding night was marred by a terrible tragedy. A fire broke out in the building, claiming Eleanor's life and leaving Michael devastated. It was said that on cold nights, Eleanor's spirit roamed the halls, searching for Michael, unable to find peace. Realizing that I was dealing with a restless spirit, I sought the help of a local paranormal investigator, Rebecca Hart. Together, we returned to the apartment, determined to communicate with Eleanor and help her find closure. On a cold winter night, armed with candles, recording equipment, and a deep sense of purpose, we set up in the kitchen where the greasy fingerprints had first appeared. Rebecca began the seance, her voice calm and inviting as she called out to Eleanor. "Eleanor Adams, if you can hear us, please show yourself. We're here to help you find peace." The air grew colder, the room filling with an oppressive energy. The temperature plummeted, and the candles flickered as if caught in a sudden gust of wind. I felt a presence, an unseen force that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Suddenly, the room was filled with a soft, sorrowful wail, the sound of grief echoing off the walls. A figure materialized before us, a woman in a flowing white dress, her eyes filled with endless sadness. "I've been waiting," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the mournful soundscape. "I can't find him." Rebecca stepped forward, her voice gentle. "Eleanor, we're here to help you. Michael is gone, but we can help you let go." Tears streamed down Eleanor's face as she looked at us with a mixture of hope and despair. "I've been searching for him, but he's gone. I don't know how to move on." Rebecca placed a hand on Eleanor's shoulder, her touch warm and comforting. "Let us help you. You don't have to be alone anymore." As Rebecca spoke, I noticed the pendant I had kept from that night, the one I thought was just a keepsake, begin to glow softly in my pocket. I realized it was more than just a memento, it was a key to helping Eleanor find peace. "We can give you something to remember Michael by," Rebecca said. "Something to keep his memory alive without binding you to this place." Eleanor nodded slowly, her form beginning to shimmer. "Thank you. I need to let go, to find peace." With a final, heartfelt whisper, Eleanor began to fade, her spirit dissolving into the ether as the oppressive energy lifted. The room felt lighter, the coldness replaced by a comforting warmth. "We did it," Rebecca said softly, her eyes reflecting the relief we all felt. "She's at peace now." As we packed up our equipment and left the apartment, the weight of the experience settled over me. The mystery of the unordered meal had led me to a deeper understanding of the unseen forces that linger in the shadows, waiting for someone to help them find peace. Life gradually returned to normal, but the memory of that night stayed with me. I kept the pendant as a reminder of the bond one had formed with Eleanor, a symbol of compassion and the power of helping those who are lost find their way. Sometimes, on cold nights, I hear faint whispers and catch glimpses of a woman in white walking through my apartment. But now, they are no longer signs of a restless spirit but echoes of a story that has been told, a soul that has found peace, and a reminder that even in the bustling heart of New York City, the past can reach out and touch the present in the most unexpected ways. Story number 3. The Meal of the Dead. Pennsylvania. I still remember the first day I started working for Midnight Bites, the local food delivery service that catered to the quiet corners of our small Pennsylvania village. My name is Lisa Harper, and at 22, I had moved to this secluded place seeking solace from the relentless pace of city life. The village, nestled between dense forests and rolling hills, seemed like the perfect escape, until the night that blurred the line between reality and the supernatural. It was a bitterly cold December evening, the kind where the wind bites through your layers and the streets are slick with ice. I had just finished my shift, delivering the last of the day's orders, and was preparing to head home when my phone buzzed with a new order notification. It was from 13 Elmwood Lane, an address I had never seen before. Curiosity piqued, I decided to take the extra delivery, thinking it might be a new customer or perhaps an error. I drove the short distance to Elmwood Lane, the streetlights casting long shadows across the snow-covered ground. The house at the end of the lane stood out, an old Victorian with peeling paint and boarded-up windows. Despite its neglected appearance, something about it seemed strangely inviting. Maybe it was the warm glow emanating from a single window or the way the wind whispered through the barren trees surrounding it. Parking cautiously near the front porch, I grabbed the insulated bag containing a large pepperoni pizza and a side of garlic knots. The house was silent, the only sound being the soft crunch of my boots against the icy path as I approached the front door. Taking a deep breath, I rang the doorbell, the sound echoing unnaturally in the stillness. After what felt like an eternity, the door creaked open, revealing an elderly woman standing on the porch. She was dressed in a simple, yet elegant, white dress that contrasted sharply with the dark, weathered wood of the house. Her hair was neatly pinned up, and her eyes held a mixture of warmth and sorrow that sent a chill down my spine. "Good evening," I greeted her, holding out the bag. "I have your order." She smiled gently, her eyes never leaving mine. "Thank you, dear. Please, come in." The invitation felt odd, especially since I had no reason to believe anyone lived here. But her demeanor was kind, and her presence somehow felt comforting amidst the eerie setting. I hesitated for a moment before stepping inside, the door closing softly behind me. The interior of the house was surprisingly well kept, considering its outward appearance. The living room was cozy, adorned with antique furniture and family photos in ornate frames. A fireplace crackled softly, casting a warm glow that illuminated the room. The scent of burning wood mingled with the faint aroma of lavender, creating an inviting atmosphere. "I'm sorry, I wasn't expecting anyone," I admitted, feeling a bit uneasy. "Oh, don't worry," she said, her voice soothing. "I just enjoy having someone around during these cold nights. Please, make yourself comfortable." Before I could respond, she motioned towards a plush armchair by the fire. I sat down, the warmth enveloping me, momentarily easing my apprehensions. She sat across from me, her hands folded neatly in her lap. "I hope you don't mind, but I haven't had company in a while," she began, her eyes reflecting a depth of emotion. "It's been a tough decade." I nodded, sensing there was more to her story. "If there's anything I can do to help." She smiled again, a touch of melancholy in her expression. "No need for that. Your presence is enough." Just then, she reached into her purse and pulled out a worn, tattered bill. Handing it to me, she said, "I believe you might not recognize this, but it's important." Confusion furrowed my brow as I took the crinkled bill from her hand. It was a $50 note, but it was old, with frayed edges and faded ink. My mind raced, trying to place where I had seen it before. "I didn't order anything that would require cash," I replied cautiously. She leaned forward, her eyes intense. "Sometimes, things come to us in mysterious ways. Please, don't mind the oddities of this house. Everything is as it should be." I tried to keep the conversation light, focusing on delivering the meal. As I handed her the pizza and garlic knots, she thanked me again, her smile unwavering. "Enjoy your night, dear. And thank you for coming." As I turned to leave, I felt a sudden urge to look back. The woman had already disappeared, leaving the door slightly ajar. Shaking off the unease, I exited the house, the cold night air greeting me once more. Driving away, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The next morning, I recounted the night's events to my coworkers at Midnight Bites. They listened intently, their expressions ranging from skepticism to fear. 13, Elmwood Lane, my friend Mark asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. "That house has been abandoned for over 10 years. After Mrs. Abigail Miller died in that fire back in 1955, no one's lived there since." My heart skipped a beat. "Wait, you're saying the woman I met last night died 10 years ago?" Mark nodded solemnly. "Abigail Miller was a beloved member of our community. Her husband, George, couldn't bear the loss and left town shortly after her death. The house has been empty ever since. Some say her spirit still lingers, unable to move on." I felt a chill run down my spine. The pieces were coming together: Abigail Miller, the abandoned house, the old, tattered bill. But I never saw her name or anything. Mark shrugged. "Maybe it's part of her ghostly presence. People have reported strange occurrences at that house, lights turning on by themselves, cold drafts, unexplained noises. But seeing a person there? That's new." Determined to uncover the truth, I decided to return to Elmwood Lane. Perhaps there was a way to help Abigail find peace, or at least understand the mysteries surrounding her lingering spirit. That night, armed with a flashlight and a newfound sense of purpose, I made my way back to the old Victorian house. The snow had thickened overnight, covering the landscape in a pristine blanket of white. The house stood silent, its windows dark and foreboding. I parked a safe distance away and approached cautiously, the cold air biting at my skin. I knocked softly on the front door, waiting for a response. When no one answered, I rang the bell, the sound echoing eerily in the empty hallway. Taking a deep breath, I pushed the door open, stepping inside. The interior was exactly as I had left it, a cozy living room with the fireplace still crackling softly. But tonight, there was an undeniable presence in the air, a sense of anticipation that made my skin crawl. I called out, "Abigail?" "It's me, Lisa. I want to help you." For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a faint whisper filled the room, the sound barely audible over the crackling fire. "Thank you for coming." I turned around, expecting to see Abigail, but the room was empty. Determined to communicate, I decided to set up a makeshift seance, hoping to bridge the gap between the living and the dead. I sat down at the kitchen table, placing the old bill and a few personal items on its surface, photos of the Miller family, a locket, and a candle for warmth. As I began to speak, the temperature in the room dropped noticeably, my breath visible in the frigid air. "Abigail, if you can hear me, please show yourself. I want to help you find peace." The room grew colder, the candle flickering as if caught in a sudden gust of wind. A soft glow began to emanate from the center of the table, and slowly, the apparition of an elderly woman in a white dress materialized before me. Her eyes were filled with sorrow, and her presence was both haunting and beautiful. I can't leave," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I'm still hungry." I felt a surge of empathy, realizing that her hunger wasn't for food, but for recognition and closure. "Tell me what you need, Abigail. I'm here to help." She looked down, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The night of the fire, I wanted to celebrate my wedding with George. But the storm was too strong, and I couldn't reach him. Now, I'm stuck here, waiting for someone to remember our love and help me move on. Tears welled up in my eyes as I listened to her story. "I'm so sorry for your loss. How can I help you find peace?" She reached out a ghostly hand towards me, her touch cold yet comforting. "Find our wedding album. It was lost in the fire. Without it, our memories are fading, and I can't move on." Determined to fulfill her request, I left the house the next day with a renewed sense of purpose. I scoured the village for any trace of the missing wedding album, consulting old records and speaking with longtime residents. It wasn't long before I found a lead, an antique store owned by Mr. Thompson, who had inherited many items from the Miller family estate. I visited the store, the bell above the door tinkling softly as I entered. Mr. Thompson greeted me warmly, his eyes twinkling behind thick glasses. "How can I help you, Lisa?" I explained my quest, the story of Abigail Miller, and the lost wedding album. Mr. Thompson listened intently, his expression growing serious. "Ah, the Millers. They were dear friends of mine. Let me check my inventory." He rummaged through a collection of old boxes and dusty shelves until he pulled out a worn leather-bound album. This belonged to them. It survived the fire, thankfully. Relief washed over me as I took the album, the leather creaking under my fingers. I thanked Mr. Thompson profusely and hurried back to Elmwood Lane, the album clutched tightly in my hands. That night, I returned to the old Victorian house, the wedding album burning a hole in my pocket. I set up the seance once more, placing the album on the table alongside the other items. "Abigail, I found your wedding album," I announced, my voice steady. "Please, take it and find peace." The room seemed to hold its breath as I waited for a response. The candle flickered, and the temperature dropped again, the air thick with anticipation. Slowly, Abigail's apparition appeared, her eyes shining with gratitude. "This is what I needed," she whispered, reaching out towards the album. "Thank you, Lisa." As she touched the album, the blue glow intensified, enveloping the room in a warm, ethereal light. The spirits of the Miller family appeared around us, their forms blending seamlessly with the light. For a moment, it felt like a timeless dance of memories and love, the past and present intertwining in a harmonious embrace. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the light began to fade, the temperature warming once more. Abigail smiled, her expression serene and content. "We can finally move on now." Thank you for remembering us. The apparitions of the Millers began to dissipate, their presence leaving behind a sense of peace and closure. The oppressive energy that had once filled the house lifted, replaced by a comforting warmth that enveloped me. I sat there for a while, processing the incredible experience, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. Helping Abigail and George find peace had not only brought closure to their lingering spirits, but had also changed me in ways I couldn't fully comprehend. In the days that followed, the old Victorian house seemed to transform. The peeling paint was freshened, and the windows sparkled under the sunlight. The village buzzed with whispers of the miracle that had occurred, and Midnight Bites even featured my story in their newsletter, the headline reading, "Delivery brings peace to restless spirits." Life in the village returned to its tranquil rhythm, but I knew that the bond one had formed with Abigail and George would forever remain a part of me. The meal of the dead had become a story of love, loss, and the enduring power of remembrance, a reminder that even in the quietest corners of our lives, the past can reach out and touch the present in the most unexpected ways. Story number 4. The Unclaimed Order. Los Angeles, California. I've always considered myself a straightforward person, practical, no-nonsense, someone who thrives on routine. My job as a part-time delivery driver for Quick Eats was simple enough: pick up orders from restaurants and deliver them to customers across the sprawling apartment complexes of Los Angeles. But that one night shattered my perception of reality and thrust me into a nightmare I couldn't have imagined. It was a cold December evening, the kind where the wind slices through your layers and the city lights blur against the darkened sky. My shift had just ended, and I was about to head home when my phone buzzed with a new delivery order. I glanced at the screen, a large pepperoni pizza and garlic knots to apartment 302 at Crestwood Towers. Odd, because I didn't recall any active orders for that address, but dismissing it as a glitch, I decided to take the delivery. Crestwood Towers was a high-rise apartment complex nestled in one of LA's quieter neighborhoods. It was modern, with sleek lines and glass facades reflecting the city's neon glow. Apartment 302 was on the 3rd floor, and the elevator was still operational, though I opted to take the stairs to save time. As I ascended the narrow stairwell, the hum of the city below faded into a distant murmur. The interior of Crestwood Towers was pristine, the marble floors gleaming under the overhead lights. Reaching the 3rd floor, I approached apartment 302, the door slightly ajar as if expecting me. I knocked gently, calling out, "Delivery for apartment 302. Silence answered me. Puzzled, I reached into my phone and dialed the number provided. After a few rings, someone finally answered, a monotone voice that did nothing to reassure me. "Yes, this is apartment 302. How can I help you?" "I have a delivery for you," I replied, holding up the pizza box. "It's from Tony's Pizzeria." There was a brief pause before the voice responded, "Oh, great. I didn't order anything tonight." Confusion crept into my mind. I double-checked the order details, no mistakes there. Determined to resolve the issue, I asked, "Are you sure? It says here you requested a large pepperoni pizza and garlic knots." The voice remained indifferent. I must have forgotten to cancel. "Just leave it at the door, please." Relieved to have some clarity, I placed the warm pizza bag on the small foyer table and prepared to leave. As I turned to head back down the stairs, my phone buzzed again. I glanced at the screen, a text message from an unknown number. "Thank you for the food, I'm right behind you." A chill ran down my spine. I spun around, but the hallway was empty, bathed in the dim light from the recessed fixtures. My heart pounded as I searched the corridor, but no one was there. The text reappeared on my screen, "Don't leave me hungry." Panic surged through me. I quickly checked apartment 302 again, but the door remained closed and undisturbed. The entire hallway was silent, the only sound my rapid breathing and the distant hum of traffic from below. I decided to leave quickly, feeling the unease settle deep within me. As I descended the stairs, the sense of being watched intensified. The shadows seemed to stretch longer, the air growing colder with each step I took. Reaching the ground floor, I hurried to the elevator, my hands trembling as I pressed the button. The elevator doors opened, and I stepped inside, pressing the button for the lobby. As the doors began to close, a flicker of movement caught my eye. For a split second, I thought I saw a figure standing in the corner of the elevator, watching me. Heart racing, I tried to shake off the thought, attributing it to exhaustion and the stressful day. When the elevator doors opened in the lobby, I breathed a sigh of relief and stepped out, the bustling energy of the building's entrance providing a stark contrast to the eerie silence of the stairwell. I retrieved my phone, which had stopped buzzing, and glanced at the clock, 3:47 a.m. It was way past my usual delivery hours, but I was certain I hadn't made a mistake. As I walked towards the exit, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The message had felt personal, almost pleading, and the empty hallway had amplified my fear. Shaking my head, I decided to forget about it and head home, eager to put the unsettling experience behind me. The streets of Los Angeles were quiet, the night's chill making my breath visible as I navigated the dimly lit sidewalks. My phone buzzed again, jolting me from my thoughts. Another text from the same unknown number, "I'm still here." I froze, the city's noises fading into the background as my attention focused solely on the message. "I'm still here," it read again, more insistent this time. My mind raced, trying to piece together what was happening. Had I somehow summoned this presence by delivering the pizza? Was it a prank, or something more sinister? The logical part of me wanted to rationalize it, but the fear was overwhelming. Just then, my phone rang. It was a call from apartment 302. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the answer button. Taking a deep breath, I swiped to accept the call. "Hello?" I said cautiously. This time, the voice on the other end was different, no longer the monotone of the earlier call, but soft and filled with desperation. "Please, don't leave me hungry." I felt a shiver run down my spine. "What do you mean?" "I didn't order anything, and I left the pizza at your door." "There's more," the voice pleaded. "I need your help." My rational mind struggled to comprehend the situation. "Who are you? What do you need help with?" There was a pause before the voice responded, "I can't leave this place. I'm trapped here, hungry for more than just food." Before I could ask any more questions, the call disconnected. I stared at my phone, my mind reeling from the encounter. The messages in the call were too coincidental, too connected to be mere happenstance. Determined to get to the bottom of this, I decided to return to apartment 302. I drove back to Crestwood Towers, the streets still deserted and the night air growing colder. The building loomed before me, its windows dark and foreboding. Parking nearby, I took a deep breath and approached the entrance once more, the earlier unease now replaced by a burning curiosity. I knocked on the door, calling out, "Apartment 302, it's Kevin with your pizza delivery." There was no response, just the heavy silence of the empty building. I reached into my pocket and dialed the number again, hoping for some clarification. "Hello, this is apartment 302. How can I help you?" "This is Kevin from Quick Eats. I delivered a pizza earlier tonight, but you didn't seem to want it. I received some strange messages afterwards." There was a moment of hesitation before the voice responded, softer this time. "I'm sorry for the confusion. You didn't actually place an order." Confusion clouded my thoughts. "But why did I receive messages saying you were hungry? What's going on here?" There was another pause, and then the voice seemed to carry a hint of sadness. "I don't know how, but something went wrong that night. I've been stuck here ever since, unable to move on." I felt a pang of sympathy. "Is there anything I can do to help you?" The voice's tone softened further. "Just knowing that someone cares is enough. Please, don't leave me here alone." I wanted to offer more, but the words seemed insufficient. "I'll do what I can. Maybe I can try to reach out to someone who can help. Thank you, Kevin. Please don't forget me." As I ended the call, a cold draft swept through the entrance hall, and the lights flickered ominously. The hallway that had been silent before now echoed with faint footsteps and whispers, as if the apartment itself was alive with unseen activity. I knew I couldn't leave things as they were. Determined to find answers, I reached out to my friend, Rebecca, a paranormal investigator with a keen interest in haunted locations. She agreed to meet me at Crestwood Towers the next day, eager to help uncover the mystery behind apartment 302. The following morning, Rebecca and I arrived at the apartment complex, the sun struggling to penetrate the thick clouds overhead. We approached apartment 302, the door still closed and unassuming. Rebecca set up her equipment, a mix of cameras, EMF detectors, and audio recorders, determined to capture any paranormal activity. We knocked on the door, and this time, someone answered, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes and a haunted expression. "Can I help you?" she asked cautiously. Rebecca explained our purpose, and after a moment's hesitation, the woman stepped aside, allowing us to enter. The apartment was modest, yet it exuded an air of neglect. Dust covered the surfaces, and the furniture was arranged haphazardly, as if abandoned in a hurry. "We received your delivery last night," I said, holding up my phone to show the messages. "But you didn't order anything." The woman sighed, her shoulders slumping. "I know. It's been like that since the incident. I can't explain it." Rebecca began setting up her equipment, while I noticed something odd, a photograph on the wall, slightly askew. It depicted a young couple, smiling and radiant, standing in front of the very same apartment building. "Who are they?" I asked, pointing to the photo. The woman glanced at it, her eyes distant. "That's me and Michael. We were supposed to be married here in 1955. I felt a chill run down my spine as Rebecca began to conduct a seance, her voice calm and focused. "We're here to help you find peace. Can you tell us what happened that night?" The woman's gaze hardened, and her voice trembled as she recounted the tragic story. "It was supposed to be the happiest night of our lives. Michael had planned everything perfectly. But a terrible storm rolled in, trapping us inside the apartment. We tried to stay warm, but the power went out, and we lost contact with the outside world." Tears welled up in her eyes. "We were separated by the chaos, and I couldn't find him. I kept calling out, but there was no answer. I felt so alone, so desperate. When morning came, the storm had passed, but Michael was gone. I've been trapped here ever since, unable to move on." Rebecca's equipment began to pick up faint EMF readings, and the air grew heavy with an unspoken sorrow. "Is there anything that can be done to help you move on?" she asked gently. The woman looked at us with hope. "If you can help me find Michael, or at least give him peace, maybe I can finally let go." Determined to assist, Rebecca and I delved deeper into the apartment's history, uncovering old records and speaking with local historians. We learned that Michael had indeed disappeared that night, never to be found, and rumors of hauntings and ghostly apparitions in apartment 302 had persisted for decades. With this knowledge, we returned to the apartment, focusing our efforts on helping the woman, now revealed to be Eleanor, find closure. Rebecca performed a series of rituals to communicate with Michael's spirit, while I assisted by searching for any clues that might lead to his whereabouts. As the sun set on the second day, the atmosphere in the apartment shifted. The oppressive sadness seemed to lift, replaced by a sense of anticipation. Eleanor stood before us, her presence still ethereal but less burdened. "I can feel Michael's presence," she whispered. "He's near, but I can't see him." Rebecca nodded, her focus unwavering. "We need to find something that connects you two, something that can bridge the gap between your spirits." I searched the apartment, my eyes landing on an old, dusty suitcase tucked away in the corner. Inside, I found a journal belonging to Michael, filled with his thoughts and plans for their future together. The last entry was dated the night of their disappearance, describing his intention to surprise Eleanor with a special anniversary celebration. "This is it," I said, handing the journal to Rebecca. "Maybe this can help us reach him." Rebecca began reading aloud, her voice steady as she interpreted the entries. Michael wanted to create a lasting memory for their marriage. He spoke of a hidden compartment in the apartment where he kept mementos of their love. Guided by the journal's clues, we searched the apartment once more, finally discovering a concealed panel behind a bookshelf. Inside was a small, locked box containing Michael's wedding ring and a heartfelt letter addressed to Eleanor. Rebecca held the ring delicately. This is what she needs to let go. It symbolizes their bond and the love they shared. Eleanor took the ring, her ghostly hand brushing against mine. "Thank you. This means everything to me." As she placed the ring on the table, a sudden warmth filled the room, and the air lightened. Rebecca began to chant softly, her words the soothing balm for the troubled spirit. The room shimmered with a gentle light, and I felt a profound sense of peace wash over us. Eleanor's form began to glow, her features softening as she smiled gratefully. "I can finally move on," she whispered, her voice filled with relief. "Thank you for helping me remember our love." With those final words, Eleanor's spirit faded, the apartment returning to its tranquil state. The oppressive energy that had haunted the place for decades was gone, replaced by a serene calm. Rebecca and I sat in silence, absorbing the magnitude of what had just transpired. We had bridged the gap between the living and the dead, helping a lost soul find peace and closure. As I left Crestwood Towers that night, the weight of the experience settled on my shoulders, but so did a sense of accomplishment. I had helped unravel a decades-old mystery, bringing light to a tragic story that had long been shrouded in darkness. The unclaimed order had been more than just a strange delivery, it was a gateway to understanding the lingering spirits of Crestwood Towers and the enduring power of love and remembrance. And as I drove home under the starry Los Angeles sky, I couldn't help but feel a deep connection to the unseen forces that shape our lives, waiting for someone to listen and help them find their way. Story number 5. The Reflection in the Delivery Bag. Chicago, Illinois. I never believed in ghosts. Growing up in Chicago, surrounded by the bustling city life and the never-ending stream of people, I always attributed unexplained phenomena to logic or coincidence. But that belief was about to be shattered in the most unsettling way. It was a cold December evening, the kind where the wind cuts through your layers and the streets are slick with ice. I had just moved into my new apartment in Lincoln Park, excited to start this fresh chapter of my life. To celebrate, I decided to treat myself to a hearty dinner from one of the local restaurants using a food delivery app one had recently downloaded. I placed an order for a large pepperoni pizza and a side of garlic knots, eager to relax and enjoy my first meal in the new place. The app confirmed my order, and I settled into my cozy living room, the anticipation of a delicious meal making the evening feel perfect. Around 8:30 p.m., the doorbell rang. I grabbed my phone to check the time, exactly 8:35 p.m. That seemed a bit quick for a delivery, but I shrugged it off, assuming the restaurant was efficient that night. I made my way to the door, the warm glow from the hallway lights inviting me inside. As I opened the door, I was greeted by a delivery driver standing on my porch. He was dressed in a standard uniform, but there was something off about him, an unsettling stillness in his demeanor that made my skin crawl. He handed me the pizza bag, his eyes meeting mine briefly before he turned to leave. "Thank you," I said, taking the bag from him. He nodded silently and walked away, disappearing into the darkened street. I closed the door and returned to the living room, placing the bag on the coffee table. The smell of freshly baked pizza filled the air, making my stomach rumble in anticipation. I picked up the bag and began to unpack, the warmth from the food contrasting sharply with the chilly night outside. But as I opened the pizza box, my excitement turned to confusion and then sheer horror. Inside the box, nestled among the slices, was a photograph, one I didn't recognize. It was a picture of me, taken from across the room, lying asleep on my bed. My heart raced as I stared at the image, the details too accurate to be a generic stock photo. Behind me in the picture, through the window, stood a shadowy figure, a woman dressed in a flowing white dress, her face obscured by darkness. She seemed to be watching me, her presence unnerving even in the stillness of sleep. I froze, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. The app showed no signature or additional notes, just the standard confirmation of my order. Who had sent this? And how was it possible for them to have a photo of me sleeping in my bedroom? My phone buzzed, pulling me from my thoughts. I glanced at the screen. It was a text message from an unknown number. The message read, "Dessert is the most interesting part." A chill ran down my spine. My blood froze as I realized the gravity of the situation. I quickly grabbed my phone and tried to trace the number, but it was untraceable, leading to nowhere. Deciding to confront the situation head-on, I turned to face my bedroom. The room was as I left it, immaculate and undisturbed. But a sense of dread settled over me, making it difficult to breathe. I approached the bed cautiously, my eyes scanning every corner, every shadow. Suddenly, I heard a soft thud behind me. I spun around, my heart pounding, but there was no one there. The room felt colder, the temperature dropping as if the very air was filled with malevolent intent. I turned back to the coffee table, noticing that the pizza bag had changed. The bag was now ripped open, the contents scattered across the table. The photograph had been removed, replaced by a small, folded note. My hands trembled as I picked it up, unfolding the crisp paper to reveal a single line: "Enjoy the reflection." Before I could respond, the lights in the apartment flickered, plunging me into darkness. My phone's flashlight cast eerie shadows as I fumbled to turn it on, the beam wavering in the oppressive gloom. In the dim light, I saw her, the woman from the photograph, standing at the foot of my bed, her eyes filled with sorrow and longing. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice barely above a whisper. She didn't respond with words. Instead, she lifted her hand, pointing towards the mirror across the room. I took a tentative step forward, my heart racing in my chest. As I approached the mirror, the temperature dropped even further, my breath visible in the frigid air. Standing before the mirror, I saw my reflection staring back at me, but something was wrong. Behind me in the reflection stood the woman, her presence now fully visible, her eyes meeting mine with a haunting intensity. I felt a force pulling me towards the mirror, the glass seemingly turning into a portal between our worlds. Desperate to break free, I shook myself, tearing my gaze away from the mirror. The room returned to normal, the woman vanishing as quickly as she had appeared. I stumbled back, my legs weak from the shock, and sank onto the floor, gasping for breath. Determined to find answers, I decided to investigate the apartment's history. I spent the next few days digging through public records, old newspaper articles, and online forums. What I discovered was chilling, a story from 20 years ago about a woman named Eleanor Hayes who lived in apartment 302. Eleanor was a quiet, reserved woman who rarely interacted with her neighbors. On the night of her 30th birthday, Eleanor disappeared without a trace. Despite extensive searches, no evidence of foul play was found, and she was declared missing. Over the years, residents reported strange occurrences, whispers in the night, unexplained shadows, and the feeling of being watched. The more I learned, the more I realized that Eleanor's spirit was still trapped in the apartment, unable to move on. The delivery must have been orchestrated by her lingering presence, a desperate attempt to reach out and communicate with the living. Determined to help her find peace, I reached out to a local medium, Rebecca Collins, who specialized in spirit communication. She agreed to meet me at my apartment, ready to assist in resolving the unfinished business that bound Eleanor's soul to the physical world. That night, with Rebecca by my side, we set up the equipment in the living room: candles, crystals, and various tools meant to bridge the gap between the living and the dead. Rebecca began the seance, her voice calm and focused as she called out to Eleanor. "Eleanor Hayes, if you can hear us, please show yourself. We're here to help you find peace." The room grew colder, the shadows deepening as if the apartment itself was holding its breath. Suddenly, the air thickened, and a presence filled the space. The temperature plummeted, and the candles flickered violently before stabilizing with a soft, steady flame. Rebecca's voice grew stronger. "Eleanor, we understand that you're trapped here. Tell us what you need to move on." A figure began to materialize before us, a woman in a flowing white dress, her eyes filled with a profound sadness. "I was never supposed to leave," she whispered, her voice echoing around the room. "They took everything from me." "Who took you?" Rebecca asked gently. Eleanor's form wavered, her sorrow palpable. "My husband, Michael. The night of my birthday, he disappeared after the party. I searched for him, but he was gone. The police couldn't find him, and I couldn't move on without him." Rebecca nodded, her voice soothing. "We can help you, Eleanor. Together, we can find closure for both you and Michael." Eleanor reached out, her ghostly hand touching mine. "Please, find him. Bring him back to me." With a renewed sense of purpose, Rebecca and I continued the seance, focusing our energy on uncovering the truth behind Michael's disappearance. As we delved deeper, the room seemed to shift, the boundaries between the living and the dead blurring. Images began to flash before our eyes, scenes from that fateful night. I saw Eleanor and Michael celebrating her birthday, surrounded by friends and family. Laughter filled the air as the party progressed, but the atmosphere grew tense when the storm began to rage outside. Lightning illuminated the room, and thunder shook the apartment. Michael stood up, his expression troubled. "I need to step outside for a moment. I'll be right back." Eleanor watched him go, concern etched on her face. Minutes later, the storm intensified, and Michael never returned. The partygoers frantically searched for him, but he was nowhere to be found. Panic set in as the night dragged on, and Eleanor's fears turned to despair. Back in the present, Eleanor's spirit seemed to draw strength from our efforts. "He was taken by the storm," she cried, her voice breaking. "They dragged him away, leaving me alone." Rebecca and I exchanged glances, understanding the tragic fate that had bound Eleanor's soul to the apartment. "Eleanor, we need to find out what happened to Michael. There must be a way to bring him back or give him peace." As Rebecca continued to channel Eleanor's spirit, we discovered that Michael had been trying to secure the apartment's structural integrity when the storm hit. The old building had been poorly maintained, and a weakened support beam had given way, trapping Michael inside the collapsed section of the apartment. With this new information, Rebecca suggested a plan to help Eleanor find peace. "If we can perform a ritual to honor Michael's memory and release the energy that's binding him, Eleanor can finally move on." We gathered the necessary items: photographs of Michael, a candle to represent his spirit, and personal mementos to anchor his memory. As we began the ritual, Eleanor's presence grew stronger, her form more defined as we channeled our intentions to free her and Michael from their earthly bonds. "Michael, we honor your memory," Rebecca intoned, placing the photograph on the table. "May your spirit find peace, and may Eleanor be free to move on." The room filled with a brilliant light, the candle flickering in harmony with the energy we were channeling. Eleanor and Michael's spirits began to merge, their forms intertwining in a display of love and longing. The oppressive cold lifted, replaced by a comforting warmth that enveloped the room. A final burst of light signaled the completion of the ritual, and the spirits began to fade, their presence leaving behind a serene calm. Eleanor looked at us with gratitude, her eyes no longer filled with sorrow but with a sense of peace. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice now gentle and free. "I can finally let go." With those words, her spirit dissipated, leaving the apartment bathed in the soft glow of dawn. The oppressive energy was gone, replaced by a peaceful stillness that signaled the end of her long torment. Rebecca and I sat in silence, absorbing the profound impact of what we had just experienced. We had not only helped a restless spirit find peace, but had also uncovered a tragic piece of history that had been buried for decades. In the weeks that followed, I noticed a change in the apartment. The sense of unease that had once filled the space was replaced by a comforting warmth, as if the presence of Eleanor and Michael had left a lasting imprint of love and remembrance. The apartment felt truly like home now, a place where the past had been honored and the future felt bright. The story of Eleanor and Michael spread through the community, a haunting reminder of the importance of remembering and honoring those who had been lost. I continued my job as a delivery driver, but now with a deeper understanding of the unseen forces that linger in the world, waiting for someone to listen and help them find peace. One evening, years later, I received another delivery order, this time to apartment 304 in the same building. A chill ran down my spine as I recognized the address, knowing the stories that surrounded it. I hesitated for a moment, then decided to accept the order, feeling a sense of duty to continue the legacy of helping restless spirits find peace. As I walked up the stairs to apartment 304, I couldn't help but wonder what stories awaited me, what souls were still seeking closure in the quiet corners of Chicago. But I was no longer afraid. I had faced the supernatural and emerged with a heart full of compassion and a resolve to help those who couldn't help themselves. The reflection in the delivery bag had taught me that sometimes the most terrifying moments can lead to the most profound connections, bridging the gap between the living and the dead with empathy and understanding. And as long as there were spirits seeking peace, I knew I would be there to listen, deliver, and honor their stories, one order at a time.